Okay, great. Can everyone see the screen? Excellent. So we had a couple questions pop up about the enterprise zone in addition to what John had just said. So we wanted to provide an information deck to address those questions and also to address development since 2009. So we're going to walk through the goal of the enterprise zone, revisit criteria, revisit the qualified census tracts, talk about the existing enterprise zone, the proposed expansion, and then next steps. So just as a reminder, the Enterprise Zone program is a program where an area in which local tax incentives are offered to encourage business investment and jobs for residents in disadvantaged census tracts. And the way in which that's measured is a criteria where the census tract needs to meet one of three criteria: 25% or more below the poverty, people below the poverty level, 25% or more of the families receiving public assistance or welfare income, employment rate at least 200% of the state's average. So it needs to hit one of those three criteria. And just as a point of information, which you've seen before, but in Connecticut, there are 17 municipalities that have enterprise zones. So one of the things that we did look at as part of the enterprise zone program was what census tracts would meet one of the following criteria. And we specifically looked in the urban core. But we can see that 0 out of the 8 census tracts highlighted meet that criteria, although 437, which is the Wall Street West Ave area, is close at 24.2. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is that 4 of the 8 census tracts highlighted meet the criteria, which is 25% or more of the families receiving public assistance or welfare income. And the third is that 7 out of 8 of the census tracts highlighted meet the criteria of unemployment being at least 200% of the state's average. So what you see on the map on the right is that these are the census tracts outlined in red that meet at least one of the 3 criteria that would be designated as eligible census tracts. So when we look at the existing enterprise zone, it includes census tracts 441 and 445. The north boundary is I-95. The boundary on the east side is the MLK. The south boundary is a little bit wonky. It doesn't actually follow a roadway. And then the east boundary follows the waterfront, but it goes to Mack Street or Burritt Ave and then along Woodward Ave to Dock. So it's a little bit of a strangely configured census tract boundary on the right side or the east side, but wanted to just give an overview for the purposes of a reminder of what the existing enterprise looks like. So we wanted to give a little bit more information about what we've seen since 2009. And part of this is the 10-year look back that John was looking at. And so since 2009, South Norwalk has seen 10 major developments. They include Ironworks, the Pearl, 19 Day Street, SoNo Collection, the SoNo Residence Inn. The developments are fairly diverse. So there are apartments, but also mixed use, residential, retail, and a hotel. The developments represent more than $100 million in appraised value, more than 2.7 million square feet in development, and more than 330 residential units. That's just within the existing enterprise zone, as you saw in Census Tract 441 and 445. Of the 10 projects, 3 have been awarded the enterprise zone program: the Ely Ave Project, the Ironworks Project, and the SoNo Residence Inn. But it's important to note that eligible projects that are in the process of being awarded include SoNo Collection and 19 Day Street. Those have not been awarded as of yet, but they are in the process. So if we look more specifically at the 3 projects that got approval, we have the Ely Avenue Project. So this is a residential project. It began receiving enterprise zone credits in 2010. Previously, the parcel was vacant and the land generated about $2,500 annually in taxes. And over the course of the 7-year phase-in, the value of the tax abatements totaled around $50,000. But now the units are bringing in more than $25,000 in annual property taxes each year, which represents a 1,000% increase in the taxes between 2010 and 2018. When we look at the second project that received approval through the Enterprise Zone program, we're looking at Ironworks, and it began receiving Enterprise Zone credits in 2016. So the property was once assessed at $3 million. It's now being assessed at nearly $30 million. Between 2007 and 2012, the property generated about $50,000 a year in property taxes, or about $300,000 over the 6 years leading into construction. In the first year, which was the highest tax abatement year, the property owner paid about $50,000 in taxes, which is just as much as it had paid during construction or previous to construction. But in 2008, the property tax paid with the Enterprise Zone abatement was $374,000. And this represents an increase in taxes of 1,129% since 2007. After 7 years, instead of $300,000 in taxes, the property will bring in about $4.9 million. And the third that we're going to look at is the Residence Inn. So the Residence Inn was awarded in 2018. The property was assessed at less than $1 million, and it now has an assessment of $15.6 million. From 2007 to 2013, the two parcels generated roughly around $17,000 a year, or about $120,000 across the 5-year time period. In the first year, which was the highest tax abatement year, the property owner paid about $48,000 in taxes. And in 2017, the taxes for the property were $13,000. So an increase of 262% has been realized between 2017 and 2018. Since 2007 and 2018. In the 3 years, the property taxes will have more than covered what there was previously. But in addition to that, the hotel is operating before the COVID-19 pandemic at around 80% occupancy, meaning more than 400 people are staying in the hotel each and every night in SoNo, which is what we would like the Enterprise Zone to do. So if we were to look at Census Tracts 441 and 445, which are the Enterprise Zone, and look at a snapshot from 2010 to 2018, we can see that the population's increased by 13%, that families in poverty have dropped by 17%, unemployment rate has dropped by 7%, the median household income has increased by 49%, and households that receive cash, including public assistance or SNAP, has decreased by 9%. And these are all census-related numbers from the American Communities Survey between 2010 and 2018. So this brings us to talking about the proposed expansion and the geography. So 441, 445 are the existing Enterprise Zone, and I put 444 in there just because it was eligible, but it's not, that isn't the Enterprise Zone currently. When we look at the expansion that we're talking about, it's 437, which is the Wall Street West Ave area. And if we were to look at demographic information between 2010 and 2018, we would see that the population's increased by 22%, the families in poverty has increased by 1%, unemployment rates decreased by 3%, median household incomes increased by 45%, and the households that receive public assistance or SNAP has decreased by 3%. But I put an asterisk beside the 22% population growth because we've seen that the Waypoint development has increased the residential units in the area by almost 700. And if we were to look at 700 units of residential and an increase there, and we times it by 2, then we're seeing the 22% increase, but a large percentage of that increase is actually based on the development that's happened since 2010. So when we apply the criteria for the Enterprise Zone to the Wall Street West Ave area, we know that the Wall Street West Ave area hits the criteria for 2 out of 3 of the eligible items. So when we talk about the percentage of individuals below poverty, it does not because it's below the 25%. But for a percentage of families who receive public assistance or welfare, income, it's at 33.5. So that hits the criteria. And the unemployment rate is 8.6, which also hits the criteria.
Hey, Jess, it's Tom. I'm just thinking in terms of what's going on now in the COVID and unemployment and all that. Do you have any sense of how that would affect this, if at all?
So the unemployment rate, it may affect because the state's unemployment rate has very likely gone up. But in addition to that, it could be that the percentage of families who receive public assistance and welfare income also goes up.
Also goes up, right.
So you would only need to hit, you'd hit one of the three criteria. So even if unemployment rate was a no, it's very likely that the percentage of families who receive public assistance would still qualify as yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I think it brings up a really good point because with what we're seeing with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a real opportunity for us to think of the economic development tools that have worked effectively in other areas of Norwalk, right? So when we look at the projects in South Norwalk, we have 10 major projects that have happened since 2009. When we look at the major projects that have happened in Wall Street West Ave since 2009, we have 2 projects. And I think that, we want to ensure that Wall Street West Ave has the same economic development tools and the same opportunity that other areas in Norwalk have. And so if we can apply the enterprise zone program to Wall Street West Ave, especially during this time, it will act as a catalyst to bring in that private investment that we so badly need. So this slide you've seen before, but I wanted to put it up again because it shows the short-term, medium-term, and long-term opportunities in the Wall Street West Ave area for development. And in the short term, we're looking at between 1 to 3 years. We're talking about the Lohman site, the YMCA, Wall Street Place, High Point, and the Norwalk Public Library. For medium, we're talking about Yankee Doodle Block, the Pulse Point, the head of the Harbor North, and Smith Street. And for long term, we're talking about the Library Block, the Lily and August site, AutoZone, medical offices, CVS, Dunkin' Donuts. So a lot of retrofitting or redevelopment on sites that already have buildings. When we look at short term, as I said, 1 to 3 years, medium term is more 3 to 6 years, and then longer term is probably 6 to 10 years. But this is really the opportunity. We know that the enterprise zone program is by right. We also know that although it's by right in South Norwalk, we've seen 10 major developments and yet only 3 have used the enterprise zone for an abatement. So I wanted to provide a little bit of that information for you to answer some of the questions that have come through, but also to give you a little bit of a better snapshot of what's happened in the enterprise zone since 2009 for Census Tract 441 and 445. So tonight we're seeking action from the Planning Committee to move the proposed enterprise zone expansion to the Ordinance Committee, but there is still a lot of work to do for the Ordinance Committee. And I think I wanted to lay them out here so that everyone was aware of what still needs to be addressed. One is we need to update the language to create consistency between the state statute and the local statute. The second is we're recommending that we add a sunset clause for the full enterprise zone program. Third is that we would propose to add the additional geography, which is Census Tract 437. And then the fourth is that we have to notify the DECD commissioner of the proposed changes. So there is a requirement from a procedural standpoint to be able to request approval from the state agency DECD to be able to have the expansion take place. But we want to make sure that at the local level, we have the support and the approvals in place before we seek the state's approval for that expansion. And that's all.
Jessica, do you see any issues with the state's approval? I know you can't predict the future, but do you see any difficulties with getting the state's approval once, and if this gets the stamp of approval from the city?
I don't see that problem for two reasons. One, the state's been pretty adamant that development needs to be deserving of any abatements or any credits that it gets. And so when we think of the enterprise zone as being a catalyst for development and a catalyst for jobs and a catalyst for residential units, the plan, there needs to be a plan, and it needs to be built for the enterprise zone program to be able to activate. It needs to have a final CO issued before the enterprise program can actually be given. So that's one. But second of all, I think just in the state that we're in from an economic development standpoint or an economy standpoint, I think that now more than ever, the state's going to be looking for municipalities to step up and use the economic tools that they have the ability to adopt to be able to spur economic development in Connecticut. And I think that this is one of those tools.
I agree. If there's ever a time for incentive, now is the time. You mentioned that there were 4